فجاءها المخاض إلى جذع النخلة قالت يا ليتني مت قبل هذا وكنت نسيا منسيا فبشق صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Today, inshallah, we're going to continue our looking at our discussion of Surah Maryam. And I want to start off with just a small recap of what was discussed last time, because there's some continuity in these ayah, because there's a story basically happening here. So story of Maryam Islam and the birth of her son Jesus, or Isa Islam. And the way I mentioned last time that Allah in Surah Tahrim highlighted Maryam as an example not just for women, but an example for all believers, right? Even for men. That she had some qualities that is necessary and is beneficial for all of us to have, and exhibit. And one interesting thing is that the difference between men and women, there's some qualities that are very majestic in nature that are normally easier for women to have. Like compassion, mercy, kindness. Those things, it's normally easier for women to show those type of things. And it's unfortunate that sometimes we in society it's sort of seen like men shouldn't really explain those type of things. Especially something such as like crying, weeping. It's something like normally we don't see as men actually having, but something really powerful that women can do very more readily than men. They touch things by things that normally we saying like myself don't normally experience. Because like for example, one time multiple times my wife will sometimes send me hadith, she'd email it to me and then she'd mention how she felt about it and it would make her cry and she reflect upon herself and the way she was. And I would be the same thing and not have that same level of emotion, right? Usually, and it's something, it's really interesting because even at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba, real men cried. At times were appropriate. The Sahaba, they cried, and it was a natural thing for them to do. And sometimes they would sit and they would reflect upon their state and the way they were. It would move them to tears, just like the reality of the opera hitting them. And they would see it as something real and immediate. It would move them to tears, just them thinking about their own self, just that quickly. And it's really, unfortunate that sometimes, this kind of behavior is even discouraged amongst ourselves. Men, this is not something that they do. They don't cry ever. It's just not, recommended in a way. But this idea of, having mercy and that level of compassion is something that Prophet ﷺ emphasized in many different ways. One time he was being with one of his grandsons, Abbasi, and he happened to kiss him. And a veteran man saw this occur. He saw him, the Prophet ﷺ, kiss his grandson, and he thought it was something kind of strange. This is something he didn't expect the Prophet ﷺ to do. And so he asked him, do you do this? Do you actually, show that type of intimacy with your children? Do you actually kiss them? And he said, yeah, of course. The Prophet ﷺ said, why not? And so then the veteran replied, he says, I have 10 children, and I've never once kissed any of them. And if you think of this, a man who has 10 children, that's a wide range of ages, right? At the minimum, one of those kids is, 10, 11 years old, right? And to go that long and never actually show your children that kind of affection, right? Because he comes from a background where that's not really recommended. Because he sees that, children should be raised to be tough, and they should be able to survive in the desert. But the Prophet ﷺ taught us something really remarkable, what he said next. He said, the one who does not show mercy will not be shown mercy. Right? If you don't actually give people mercy, how can you expect that you actually receive any in return? And it's something really important for us to have. These qualities of compassion, love, and mercy, they're emphasized in so many different places, not just in the Quran, but in the Surah and just in general. It's really important for us to have those type of things. And so, I think that was long enough of a tangent. I'm just going to go to basically what happened. We discussed last time was that Maryam was told that she was going to have a son. And Jibreel came and he told her, you're going to have a child. And so at first she's shocked by this, and she says, how is this possibly going to happen? And I've never been married, I've never been unchaste in any single way whatsoever. How is it going to be possible to have a child? And Jibreel responds, he says, just like that, it'll happen. And it's amazing that that same phrase was used when Zechariah Islam, just one page before, earlier in the surah, had asked for a child, and he asked, how is that possible as well? How am I going to have a child? Because he was at a very, very old age. Multiple ages were discussing, how old he was. He was at 70, 80 plus years old. And he was going to have a child with a wife who's equally as old as him. And so He says the same exact thing. It will happen just like that. The same exact phrase, except this time addressing Maryam alayhi salam. That your words, your master says that for him this is easy. It requires no effort whatsoever. Hayyin is like, something requiring no sort of energy expenditure at all. Like something being hayyin would just be like moving my arm or even picking up this book. It doesn't require any effort out of me whatsoever, even like breathing. Like something that requires no effort. And it's really important that Allah illustrated this right from the very beginning. Because, at the very beginning, Allah is saying that him creating this child, Isa alayhi salam, with no father, required no effort from him whatsoever. He didn't need any sort of, nothing was, taken away from him at all. It required him no sort of energy expenditure. It was easy for him to do this, that him making this child. And then, he goes on to say, that he will be a miraculous sign for all people, the Nasi, for all types of people, he will be a miraculous sign. And I want to take just a moment to look at this word ayah, because it's something we say all the time. Like we say these are the words that we read in the Quran, they're ayah. They're ayahs of Allah. But ayah meant for a miraculous sign that you could not ignore. It was something you saw, and there was no way for you to move your head out of it. Like, seeing this, and it's staring you in the face. You couldn't get away from it. And that's what Allah is saying this child will be. It will be an ayah for all mankind. Because this miracle is something that's never happened in the history of mankind. For a man, a child to be born without a father, has never happened in history. The closest thing, and Allah equates these two, and we'll talk about that later when we get to the birth of Isa alayhi salam. Adam alayhi salam is the closest example that you can get to when you think about Isa alayhi salam. And Allah does, in the Quran, equate the two together in the miraculous nature. And so, one of the main things is just as a side note, my teacher never really liked it for us to ever say verses in the Quran. It's something Ustad never really liked for anyone to say this is a verse. Because a verse has a certain context and a certain type of, association with it. Normally verses are something like, poetry or verses of the Bible, right? But an ayah is a miraculous sign in its own nature. Because if you look at an ayah, it's not just a verse, it's not just a sentence, right? Because an ayah can be alif lam mim, right? Something no one knows what that means. Or it can just be one word, like al-Qadiyah, right? Or an ayah can be multiple sentences, right? You can think of an entire page, one ayah, right? So it's its own form of literature. It has its own standard and its own level. And so for us, we should say that ayah and mean what it actually means. Like it's a miraculous sign. This is a miraculous sign that points to something, right? A sign points to something. It indicates something else. And so these ayat indicate the truth of Allah and the truth of us being creation, right? Because we see ayat all around us in our lives, right? The trees, the ocean we have here, even us ourselves in existence at all. Anything is an ayah of Allah. It shows, it proves to us that there's creation, our bodies itself. And so I just want to mention that real quick. And then Allah says, وَرَحْمَةً. There will be a sign for all people, وَرَحْمَةً مِنَّا, and a mercy from us, right? And it's really beautiful that Allah said this would be a mercy. Especially in direct relation. First, it obviously applies to all people. It will be a mercy for them. Why? Because, if you look at what happened previously in the Surah with Zakaria alayhi salam, he was distressed. And he was thinking about what would happen after I pass away, right? Because he wants to have a child, and he wants someone to continue on this legacy after him. So he's worried about, he even says that he has close relatives, he's worried about them. He doesn't think they can do it. He doesn't find them trustworthy, right? And so the same situation arises again, where, the nature of the deen at that time was slowly being, corrupted, by the Torah being changed, right? This is before Jesus comes and he brings the Injil. Before that happened, there were certain changes that were occurring at the time. The same thing that Zakaria was afraid of, Allah mentions here that there will be a mercy for people. Why? Because there will be a new form of revelation that people can come towards, right? People have been waiting for this to happen. If you look at the way Zakaria when he speaks, he's kind of waiting for something to happen. But it didn't happen in his lifetime, it happened with Maryam alayhi salam. And it'll also be a mercy for other people who haven't accepted the religion. Why? It will give them an opportunity to see this, how can you ignore this happening? Right? It's a miraculous sign, how can you possibly ignore this? It's a mercy for them to come towards the deen. But it's also a mercy for Maryam. And that's something really unique. Because this entire discussion what's happening in this story is something initially very difficult for her. And she'll say it in her own words. And we'll get to it in a few minutes. But initially this pregnancy was something very challenging and difficult for Maryam. But in the end, it was actually something that was one of the greatest things that ever happened. And not just to her, but in the history of mankind. And if we go back to what we mentioned last week of the idea of Jibreel, And his nickname, Islam, his nickname was Ruh. We talked about this last week, right? And the way he brings things that are of comfort to us, right? They enlighten our bodies, right? Because I mentioned this last time, I think it's worth repeating. When we say Ruh, like our soul, it's what animates us, it keeps us alive. Without it, we die. And we become hard, and we become like, rigid bodies, right? Jibreel Islam, he brings revelation, he brings messages to people, right? On occasion that Allah decides this person is worthy of receiving a revelation or a message from an angel directly. When he does that, he brings things that are beneficial to people, right? That uplift us and give life to our hearts. That's what Jibreel Islam does. Stop. Good. Is that? Yeah. Sorry. And so, when you look at this, Maryam Islam may initially have some difficulty with this, but we'll see that at the end, how amazing it is that this happened to her. And that how angel Jibreel, when he brings a message, when he brings new things to the deen, it's something beneficial. And then Allah says, وَكَانَ أَمْرًا مَقْضِيًّا. This has been a matter that's already been decided. Maqdiyan, it comes from a root word that many of you probably heard before. It's like, qadi. If you heard that word, it means like a judge, right? Islamic Jewish parents, we call a judge a qadi. For two reasons that are implied in this root word. One, that he can make a decision, and two, has the authority to carry it out. And so when Allah says, Gana, this has always been something that he decided. A long time ago, Allah decided, Gana, Amran Maqdiyan. This would be a matter that he decided, that Allah decided, that no one else had any influence on whatsoever. Allah decided that this would happen, that she would have a son without a father, and he allowed it to occur. He made both of those things happen. This is going to become very important later on because of the way Jesus was taken to be, taken too far to go, right? And in some ways in that Trinity. But Allah here again, just at the very beginning, illustrated that he made this decision, no one else was a part of it at all. Even Isa was not, some, the Trinity that we talk about, like, he had his own part, like he wanted to come and, save mankind, all those sort of things. Isa was a creation of Allah. Allah decided that this would happen. And so then, in the next ayah, ayah 22, Allah says, فَحَمَلَتْهُ. And so then she carried him. حَمَلَتْهُ. Hamalah means literally for someone to pick up something and carry it. Like I could pick up this cup of water, I could carry it. But in English as well, we say like, when someone's pregnant, they're carrying a baby. The Arabs used to say the same sort of thing. So فَحَمَلَتْهُ, now she's actually pregnant. She can actually feel this baby in her. She's actually physically carrying this baby. فَحَمَلَتْهُ فَانْتَبَذَتْ بِهِ مَكَانًا قَصِيًّا. And then she went and she secluded herself because of him in a faraway place. First word I want to look at is فَانْتَبَذَتْ, that she secluded herself. The same word that Allah used earlier when she secluded herself in worship of Allah, so that she, when she was away, she was basically doing itikaf. Allah used the same word here again. But this time her reason for doing so is different. Right? First, originally she secluded herself away from her family from worshiping Allah. Right? That was her main reason to do so. But here, it's really beautiful where it says, فَانْتَبَذَتْ بِهِ, because of him. And the him referring to the child in her womb. Because of him, she secluded herself. And you learn so much from this, just these two words right here. Because she did it, because she was carrying this child. If you look at the life of Maryam up to this point, before she was given this child, her life basically consisted of just a few things. She was the student of Zakaria, so she studied the Deen. She took care of the house of worship. She taught other people, and that was basically her day-to-day life, right? She was in the care of Zakaria. She was being raised to do that. And so for her, for this to happen to someone like her, someone who's from the family of the prophets, it was literally erupted into something like a scandal. And she feels that's going to happen, and it will. And we won't talk about it this week, but next week we'll get to it, inshallah, where people directly accuse her of being unchaste. And they don't try to hide it at all. They directly, accuse her of that to her face. And they even attack her own family in these upcoming ayat. And so her being afraid of that, what does she do? She starts to go away in a faraway place. Makana Qasiyya means a place like remote. Like if there's a word used for like the furthest corner of a building or some area. The furthest corner of a place. She goes that far away. So why no one can initially, she doesn't know what to do initially. Like, what's going to happen when people first see this child, right? And so she secludes herself because she has to, because of the child growing near her. Allah says, because of the child, because you can't hide a pregnancy for too long. Initially, she can wear looser clothing and try to hide it from other people. But it reaches a certain point where someone can just look at you and just be like, that lady's pregnant. You can't hide it after a certain point. So because of this, and to prevent, what people may say of her, she goes and she hides in a faraway place. And then the next ayah says, فَجَاءَهَا الْمَخَاضُ إِلَىٰ جِذْعِ النَّخْلَةِ. And so something forced her to move, like, and then the last says what it was. So makhadu basically, the Arabic it meant for something to be in a canister, like a liquid, you had it, you shook it. That's literally what the word meant. If it was going to be in a canister, you shake it. The Arabs would figuratively use this to describe the baby in a mother's stomach, right? Like it moves, right? You can feel it shaking. That's what this word is illustrating. This word that it's shaking. And some scholars have interpreted it to mean that she was actually going through contraction at this time. And this forced her, and then she couldn't, if you imagine what's happening, she's by herself and alone. There's no one there to help her, right? And we'll talk about how Allah comforts her during this time. Because one of the most important things that even we were studying about last semester, even this past block in school, is the importance for someone who's pregnant to be comforted, to be stress-free. Because that does have, impacts the relationship between just not the mother and the child and their outcome, but also, the whole, everything that goes along with it, making the difficulties that can occur in the marriage, having in the birthing process, just based on the state of the mother at that time. And we probably won't get to it today, but it's amazing how Allah comforts her during this time, because she is alone when this happens. So her, and she's experienced this thing inside her stomach, and it forces her to go إِلَىٰ جِذْعِ النَّخْلَةِ, to the trunk of a date palm tree. Like, you can imagine, she's bracing herself against it. Because she's weak and she doesn't know what to do. Because obviously she's a young woman, she's never had a baby on her own, and she's never had been pregnant, she doesn't know what's going to happen. Right? So she's bracing herself against this trunk. And she, basically she explains, because she's so shocked at what's going to happen. Because up until now, if you think about it just psychologically, scholars have looked at this, she understands that she's pregnant. And it makes sense to her. But when that baby starts to move, she starts to feel it contracting inside, she's like, this is really going to happen. And then all these thoughts would start pouring into her mind about, I'm actually going to have a baby. What are people going to say? I have to go back home eventually, And all these things are occurring in her mind. And so she explains, she just called it. Yeah, laid the knees. She's making an exclamation of it's a hard phrase to translate in Arabic, but she's making yeah, laid the knees an exclamation of it can have a lot of connotations, just regret and remorse and different things like that. But basically it's a way of someone saying being explained at their state and just being oh my God, how is this possibly happening? Being in this state of shock and awe of what's going on to them. And she says, yeah, I wish I died before this happened. That's what she says. She says, I wish I had died before this had even happened. Before all this had happened to me. Because again, it's not about her own self, really. We'll see this later on. That she's concerned not just for her own self, but her own family is what she's most concerned about. Because of what will happen when people see this. She's like, I wish I just died, and this never happened to me, so my family wouldn't have to go through the trouble of all this. Because when she takes this baby back home, there will be a scandal that will erupt. And then she says, وَكُنْتُ نَسْيًا مَنْسِيًّا. And then she wished I was something that was, Nasya means something that you could easily forget. Mansiya, just erased from people's memory. She emphasizes it twice over. I wish people just forgot about me, and they never even remembered it again. I was just erased from people's memory. I wish I had died, and the way she says kuntu, I had always been something they forgot. It's I wish they never even realized it at all whatsoever. That's the state of her right now. And the way she feels in terms of how much of stress this places upon her. And you can imagine someone's going to give birth, and they're going to go through this pregnancy. But for them to be at that level of emotion and stress is not something healthy, right? It's just not good in general. And so immediately, I'll just continue. I was trying to stop here, but I guess we got through the ayah quicker than I expected. Immediately, right after that, the ayah says, فَنَادَهَا مِنْ تَحْتِهَا. And then something called out to her from below her. فَنَادَهَا مِنْ تَحْتِهَا. And so most scholars would say this is Angel Jibreel, calling out from below her. This is important because this isn't mentioned in this ayah, but in Surah Mu'minun, ayah 50, Allah mentions that she went to a place that was raised and elevated, and there was water there, right? And it's important for it to be a raised place. I didn't have time for that when we were mentioning today with Surah Mu'minun. It's at an elevated place. It's important because she feels safe. She can see her own surroundings, and she can be in a place of comfort. There's water there that'll take care of her. Allah will mention that in this ayah as well. But that happened in Tahtiha. So the angel called out from below her. What's an amazing thing here is initially Angel Jibreel came to her directly, right? He was in her presence, right next to her, right? And he told her she was going to have a child. Now, I talked about last week how that was sort of a test for her. to see, to test her in terms of her chastity. But this time, nada means to call someone out from far away. It means to yell. It implies a loud voice. And now, it's just beautiful. One word allows you to illustrate so many things. One, that she's at a place far away from you, right? She's further away. She's at an elevation, and so that she feels safe. But he's calling to her from far away. Why? Out of respect for her Ayah. Because that's one of the most amazing qualities of Maryam. She has an Ayah. Even Angel Jibreel is at a distance and is calling out to her from a distance. Such an amazing thing that just one word alone illustrates that for us. From below her, don't grieve. Don't be sad about all this. He's saying, don't be sad, right? Your master has placed beneath you Sabiya. I won't go into the linguistics of this word. Basically, most scholars in the opinion that this meant like a river or a stream. And he said, your Lord has placed this beneath you. He's giving you the stream. And then, and Jibreel says, and he says, go shake. It is a command. He says, go shake the trunk of the date palm tree, right? And it's amazing, this word here. And scholars have discussed this into some depth. This word huzi, right? This command to shake this date palm tree, it was a word used. It's an amazing thing in Arabic language. Like, every word has like a specific context. It was used for this. It wasn't just mean like, someone shakes something lightly. It meant someone put a lot of force and just shake something bigger than them, and that, was large and required a lot of effort and strength. So it's an appropriate fitting here, shake this date palm tree, right? If you think about it, a small woman against a date palm tree, date palm tree is a lot bigger, right? But another beautiful thing is, so scholars have had two interpretations of this. One, Allah gave her some supernatural strength, right? She was in a state of difficulty and she called out. And she was like, I wish I just died. I can't handle this anymore. Immediately, Angel Jibreel reinforces her, tells her, don't be sad. You have water, and he says, go and shake this date palm tree, right? One, scholars have said that, she gained supernatural strength and she was able to shake the tree and dates fell down, right? Because normally you don't do that. That's not how you get dates out of a date palm tree, right? You go up the date palm tree and you get it out, right? It's a very strong tree. You can't do that. It won't work. No one can, shake a tree to work. But the second interpretation, which I personally find, a lot more beautiful, is that all she had to do was just put her hand on it, and then Allah caused the date palms to fall down, the dates to fall down from the tree. And if you look at that, it's an amazing reflection that what Allah just asks from me and you on a daily basis. Just do your part. That's all Allah is asking out of her. Just go and try to shake the tree. And just do that much, show your effort, and then Allah will make the rest easy for you. And the dates just fall down upon her. And then, and it's illustrating the next word that says distracted. And then they'll fall. And this word actually means for things to fall repeatedly. Like they'll just keep falling down. So anytime you need more food, right, if she's stressed, if she gets hungry again, she already has water. Anytime you need more food, just go touch the tree, it'll fall down again. You'll just keep getting all the food you need. You'll be fine. You'll be taken care of. To sakit aleki, they'll fall upon you. Rutuman janiya. I didn't mention this. Rutuman janiya. Like, fresh traits. Fresh dates. Janiya meant like, rutuman meant dates that were fresh, and janiya meant like, tasty, good dates. Because the best type of dates you could possibly have. And they'll be there right for you anytime you need them at all. And so I went a little bit over it. We'll probably do these ayahs again next time just to clarify some of the things. But I felt I didn't want to stop at the part where she said, like, in distress and stuff like that. But it's amazing how Allah, reinforced it. And we'll see this in the next ayah as well, where Allah comforts her again. It makes things easy for her, so that her pregnancy is something that's not something that's too much of a stress and strain upon her. And so, inshallah, this was beneficial for everybody. I really go ahead and stuff I do, like, stuff